It's almost impossible to stop spiritual abuse in the church when pastors and elders and spiritual power brokers cover for each other. But the reality is that happens way too often, and it looks like that's exactly what's happening with a recently disgraced and removed megachurch pastor, Brady Boyd. Now, if you're not familiar, Brady was forced to resign from New Life Church in Colorado when it came out through some disclosures in court that disgraced pastor Robert Morris had filed. But through those disclosures in court, it came out that it's likely he should have known. Brady Boyd should have known before he became the pastor of New Life Church that Robert Morris's inappropriate relationship that he called it for years was actually SA of a minor, that he should have known and he didn't say anything. But then he was forced to resign as his elders uncovered documents and emails that show that even though he denied it, they said it shows that he was involved and he knew all these details, but he didn't do anything. So that's happened very, very recently. He was removed. But guys, surprise, surprise, shocker to probably nobody. He's already not just planning a return to ministry, he's already engaging in a return to ministry. And all right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about it. You see the headline there: Brady Boyd launches new ministry a month after being forced out of a Colorado megachurch. Now, again, we had some people talking about in the chat earlier on the live stream. We're way too quick to, as a Christian church, to try to restore pastors and try to put them right back on the platform because they're talented, they're good speakers, they're charismatic, they bring in money, they make us feel good. For all of those reasons, we're restoring people who have never even at times repented for what they've done. And guys, there are certain things, like I'm just going to say it. If you have covered up the mistreatment of a child, you don't ever need to be in ministry again. I don't care how much you repent. You're not above reproach. You can't do it. So for me, based on what I've seen, I would have to say that what we have seen, what we have heard, the documents they say that they have looking at scripture, I would say that Brady Boyd is disqualified from ministry and doesn't need to be in any sort of ministry yet, less than a month. Here he is. And again, this article is from July 23rd. It's taking me a little bit to get to it, but you see Brady there. And it says a month after being forced to resign from a Colorado megachurch for inaccurate statements about his knowledge of Robert Morris's child SA, Brady Boyd has launched a new ministry. And of course, he's not just launched a new ministry, he's taking donations. And I bet if you pay attention to it, I bet in the first month or two of being a ministry, Brady asked for donations probably 10 times as much as we've asked for donations the entire, over a year the SAI has been in existence, because that is the playbook. But Brady announced the ministry called Psalm 68 Ministries in a private Facebook group called Support Brady Boyd. If you have a pastor who is removed from ministry because he knew about child SA and didn't say anything, why in the world would you create? Someone had to create this Facebook page. But even if it was Brady himself or his wife, why is anybody a member of this Facebook page? Why would you be a member of a social media page to support someone who has done that thing? But I digress. They posted in this group that they founded this ministry on June 21st, very soon after Brady Boyd resigned as senior pastor. He uses Psalm 68 and basically says, hey, it talks about God being a father of the fatherless, defender of the widows. I haven't read Psalm 68, 5, and 6. But he says, we want to complete our ministry careers caring for the people Jesus always sees, but are often forgotten about by society. Now, here is my biggest problem with that. You are starting a ministry to care for the people Jesus sees, but are often forgotten about by society after you were removed from being a pastor because you overlooked sin against the forgotten about, because you overlooked abuse and criminal activity over the forgotten about. It's just really rich that this is the verse he chose. This is what he decided to do. Now, guys, I'm going to call a spade a spade. This is just my opinion for legal purposes. This is just my opinion. But my opinion is that this is not about completing your ministry careers to help people. In my opinion, this looks like it is completing your ministry career because you need money and you need some cheddar cheese, and you don't want to all of a sudden not be able to live your same lifestyle on the back end of your life. So you're starting this ministry, and he's going to say all these good things it's about. And I would challenge two things. One, I don't think he's the right person at all to do all these good things he's talking about. Two, the last thing he's going to say is it's going to allow him to preach. You're going to see it here in a minute. And my guess is that that's what this whole thing is about. Let's create this nonprofit so we can take tax-free donations. So that it's got to be more than a nonprofit. It needs to be a ministry and tied to a church so that we don't have to report what we're doing with these donations and the government doesn't have to know, but we don't have to tell anybody. And we're going to talk about all these good things to solicit donations when the reality is, it looks like the biggest reason for doing this is it's going to allow him to preach in churches so he can continue taking those big honorariums. And if you missed it, we talked about it in previous videos, especially the ARC investigation, the celebrity preacher scam. But guys, I was once one of the people in charge of paying people these honorariums, and these big name speakers, many of them, they're not getting out of bed for less than $10,000. You see that famous pastor preaching at your church, a lot of times that's a $10,000 to $30,000 honorarium. Okay. And they're doing this at each other's churches. So if he can do that, then he's okay. He doesn't need a salary. He doesn't have a need. So again, I could be totally wrong. You would have to ask Brady Boyd. But as someone in ministry who is looking at Brady Boyd, looking at this from the outside, that's what it looks like to me, in my humble opinion. But he says, this includes pastors who have been wounded by the rigors of ministry. It's important that he says he's going to protect a group of people. And before he talks about anybody else, the first group of people that he says he's going to defend are pastors who have been wounded by the rigors of ministry. Now, I've talked about this in previous conversations. I'm talking about this more with some pastors going forward. Pastors are mistreated by parishioners, especially when those parishioners have more authority than them. In some of these situations, there are situations where like deacons and volunteers and big donors have the authority to even spiritually abuse pastors. So I'm not saying that pastors aren't mistreated, but think about this list and then ask yourself, does it make sense in this situation that he's starting out with protecting pastors who were wounded before protecting the other people on this list? Because this sounds very self-serving since he's trying to paint himself as a pastor who's been unjustly wounded. But he says includes pastors who have been wounded by the rigors of ministry. It includes kids in developing countries and those needing clean drinking water, education, medical services in Central and South Africa. So, um, one, if you got a guy who was removed from ministry because he did not report the essay of a child, and he says, I'm starting a new ministry, and one of the things we're going to do is take care of children in need. I would say that we have certain lists and registries in the United States for exactly that reason. Okay. I would say that Brady, I don't know if you're paying any attention to this. It feels like you're the worst person in the world to be a fit for this kind of ministry. Okay. But again, how do you get donations? It's much easier to get donations for kids and kids who need food and clean drinking water than it is to go, hey, could y'all donate so I can keep preaching and keep getting, good honorariums and keep making money? People aren't going to donate to that the same way they're going to donate with this. But even with that, even as oh gosh, even as hypocritical as this sounds, even as dangerous as this sounds, before he ever talked about the kids, he talked about helping wounded pastors. Right? You can see where it looks like his mind is at. You can see his post there, so you can go to this and you can read the whole post. But again, it talks about here. However, it was Boyd's alleged failure to act on behalf of Cindy Clemishier, who had been essayed as a child and then lying about it, that cost Boyd his job. But now he's starting this nonprofit to protect kids. Okay. Now, there's a couple of other things that are going on here. They talk more about why he was removed, and all that sort of stuff. They get some commentary and some comment from Cindy Clemishier's sister, all that sort of stuff. But I want to get down to this piece of the article. Trinity Fellowship and Jimmy Witcher support Brady Boyd. Well, you may ask, how is he starting this brand new ministry? And doesn't it take longer than just a week or two to be approved as a church with the IRS? Well, yes, it does. How do you get around that? You come under the umbrella of an existing church and ministry. And if you haven't watched the Religion Business documentary yet, we did a kind of a full overall review of that. We've reviewed a couple of episodes. We're going to continue reviewing those episodes in the coming weeks. But if you haven't watched it yet, one of the things they talk about is ministries and nonprofits that are just regular nonprofits that become associations and conventions of churches. And then because they're tied to that church, they are now considered a church. They don't have to file anything. So if you want to start a new nonprofit and you want it to be a church to have all those protections, and you don't want to be transparent, and you don't want to have to try to petition the IRS for it or wait months, then all you need to do is start it as a regular nonprofit while it's already under the umbrella of a church. And then it immediately can be petitioned to become an association and convention of that church. And never, ever do you have to actually report any of those things. Well, that's what it looks like he's doing with Trinity Fellowship. Okay. Boyd says his new ministry will be based in his Colorado Springs home. Okay. So it's based in Colorado Springs. Tell me how this makes sense. So instead of having any church in Colorado, even in his state, that would support this ministry, he's basing the ministry in Colorado Springs, but he's operating under the authority of the elders of Trinity Fellowship Church in Amarillo, Texas. Why is he operating out of a church in Texas when he's in Colorado and doing the ministry in Colorado? Probably because this church in Texas was probably the closest one that he could find that would actually support him. But they did support him. And because they're willing to support him, we got this guy getting right back in ministry. And his plan is to do ministry that involves children, which should make everybody's alarm bells go off based on what happened. But it says, of course, Boyd's got a relationship with these people. Boyd was on staff at Trinity in the 1990s and remains an apostolic elder there. That phrase, apostolic elder, overseer, apostolic overseer, any of those phrases should make your spidey senses start tingling, okay? Every red flag you have should go off when you see those phrases. You should start asking questions because the Bible is not going to talk about apostolic overseers or elders, but people in that ARC model of governance, that kingmaker model of governance, that CEO, president of the corporation who picks his own accountability model of governance, they like to call the governing body apostolic elders. And guess what? Brady Boyd was on staff at Trinity in the 90s, and he remains an apostolic elder for them. So now he is supposed to be the spiritual apostolic oversight, the accountability for this church. And now he's asking their pastor and their elders, who he's the accountability for, to now be his accountability in this new nonprofit. So do you see the circle that we're making? If you hold me accountable, I'll hold you accountable. And if you don't hold me accountable, I won't hold you accountable, right? It's a good old boys network. It is the definition of a conflict of interest. Okay. This wouldn't fly in any sort of corporate board, any sort of secular business, unless it's a family owned business. Okay. It is a feedback loop. It is a closed feedback loop. So he's an apostolic elder at this church, and now he's submitting to those elders for his new ministry. But it says Trinity is also where Jimmy Evans, who previously served as an elder at Gateway with Boyd, pastored for 3 decades. Evans also serves as an apostolic elder at Trinity. So let's think about a few things there. One, if you've been listening for very long, you know that Jimmy Evans has had his fair share of problems. Jimmy Evans was caught on a recording, okay, by Jonathan and Susie Lamb. He was caught on a recording exhibiting spiritually abusive behavior when he literally told Jonathan Lamb that his mom, Joni Lamb, the CEO of Daystar Television, was the voice of God to him. And if you listen to that recording, it is textbook behavior that I would call spiritual abuse. And I think most people who are in this world would define as spiritual abuse because it meets the definition from my vantage point. Okay. So not only is Jimmy Evans involved, okay, but Jimmy Evans is also an apostolic elder at Trinity. Who are the apostolic elders at Trinity Fellowship in Amarillo, Texas? Who are the people that are supposed to hold their pastor accountable? Who are the only 2 people who, based on this form of governments that it looks like they're using, who are the only 2 people who can normally remove that pastor? Jimmy Evans and Brady Boyd. So Brady Boyd coming in a way as the only threat to this pastor, the only person who can kind of be his boss, says, hey, I want to start a new ministry and it's going to be under your church. Well, what's he going to do? Say no? When this is one of the only people who might could hold him accountable? Again, this is a huge conflict of interest. But also, if you go to a church and both of your apostolic elders, 100% of the apostolic elders we know about, and usually there's like 2 or 3, maybe 5 most on these boards. These are the only 2 I know here. When your apostolic elders are people like Jimmy Evans and Brady Boyd, who have been credibly accused of spiritual abuse. Not only credibly accused, but there's documents that New Life says they got to prove it. And I've heard the recordings with Jimmy Evans. You got a problem. Okay. This church is a problem to begin with because their accountability are literally the people who won't receive accountability. Their accountability are people who are disqualified from ministry. Their accountability are people who have shown a propensity for spiritual abuse and for sin. Okay. But it gets worse. As reported earlier by TRR, court documents filed by Morris indicate that Jimmy Evans also knew about Morris's essay of Clemishire in 2007. And according to an email from then Gateway elder Tom Lane, Evans attended a meeting in 2007 with Morris and other elders to discuss the allegations. It looks like he knew the same things that Brady knew and that he should have from this information known that Cindy Clemishire was underage when this essay happened and that it was essay and it was not an inappropriate relationship. Okay. Not only that, though, look at this. How do we know that? Because of a 2007 email from Tom Lane to other elders. Now, double check me. I could be wrong. I'm trying to think about this off the top of my head, but I believe that Tom Lane was one of the apostolic overseers with Dr. Michael Brown of Mercy Culture, if I'm not mistaken. Last time I checked, they had taken that off their website, but we could go to the Wayback Machine and we could look. I should have looked this up before. I wasn't even thinking about it, but I'm pretty sure Tom Lane was the other apostolic elder, which means that the apostolic elders or apostolic overseers of Mercy Culture, who we've also talked about multiple times in multiple videos, that we shouldn't be surprised if that's the case. We should not be surprised when we're consistently seeing disqualifying, sinful behavior out of Landon and Heather Schott. If their overseers are people like Dr. Brown, who has disqualified himself from ministry and had credible accusations and had an investigation that came back and said he was guilty of sexually abusive misconduct, and then Tom Lane, who was a part of this group, who really should have known, was an elder at Gateway, and by all accounts that I can see, it looks like he should have known that Cindy Clemishire was underage and this was the essay of a minor. Okay, so again, you got Brady Boyd and Jimmy Evans, who are the apostolic overseers and accountability of this church in Texas. And then you've got Tom Lane, if I remember correctly, and I know it was Dr. Michael Brown, the apostolic overseers of Mercy Culture. But then when Dr. Michael Brown is coming under fire for this investigation, who is it that was trying to restore him? Mercy Culture. Why would we not try to restore the person who is holding us accountable? And then Brady Boyd needs to be restored. So what does he do? I need a new ministry. I need a church to work under. I need to be able to take these donations. Well, he just goes to one of the churches he oversees and they start his ministry. Do you see how this feedback loop works? Do you see why we keep having these church scandals? Because there is a good old boy network that has built a circular feedback loop where it's literally one big conflict of interest where it's one good old boy versus another good old boy looking out for each other. And the biggest problem is that none of them are good old boys. There's not good in this. Okay. And if you looked at the thumbnail on the live stream for this, I don't know if it'll be on the thumbnail for the actual video when we put it out, but the thumbnail on the live stream, I've literally got Chris Hodges in a picture where he's standing arm in arm with Robert Morris. Because guess what? Robert Morris was one of the apostolic overseers for Chris Hodges in Church of the Highlands until all of this came out. It is all interconnected and they're covering for one another. And you're going to see, well, it looks, let me just say it looks like it would be easy for them to cover for one another. And in certain situations like Brady Boyd, Mercy Culture, Dr. Michael Brown, it looks like they're covering for one another. Again, that's just my opinion. Can't prove that they're all covering for one another. But doesn't it look like that? Isn't there smoke there? And you're going to see some more connections here in just a moment. Okay. But let me see. Let's go ahead and move down. Despite these facts, Trinity Fellowship Senior Pastor Jimmy Witcher seems unfazed. At a Q&A time with his congregation a few weeks ago, Witcher stated, and I quote, "We can find no disqualifying conduct that Brady committed. Therefore, Brady continues to be a friend and apostolic elder of Trinity Fellowship. I'm proud to call him a friend, and I'm proud to call him an apostolic elder." Now that's weird. And again, just me, just my vantage point. I would not be proud to call someone a friend if they knew about or should have known about a child SA case and then they covered it up just to keep one of their friends in power and make money and stay in ministry. I wouldn't call him a friend. I wouldn't call him an apostolic elder. But listen to how Witcher frames this. And again, Witcher is the pastor of Trinity Fellowship, and Brady Boyd is one of his overseers. Okay. Witcher also said that he had spoken to the overseers at New Life about the situation with Boyd. Okay. Now, keep in mind, the elders at New Life are the ones who told Brady Boyd he needed to resign. The elders at New Life are the ones who said, we've got the emails that show you were in all these emails and you should have known. Okay. That was the elders. If you go back to our two-part investigation talking about ARC and you look at those example bylaws of what that hybrid church governance model the ARC proposes is supposed to look like, the elders are the ones that have to call in the overseers, but the overseers can only come in when called in by the elders, but the overseers are the only ones that can actually hold the pastor accountable. Again, now these elders, because they had these emails, it looks like they forced Brady to resign. If you don't resign, we're just going to release all this stuff. It's going to get worse for you. You're guilty. You need to resign. That's what it sounds like. Okay. Notice Witcher did not reach out. Never going to say in this article that he ever reached out. It doesn't say in that recording. He didn't tell his congregation, as far as I understand, that he reached out to the elders and asked to see those emails. Instead, who did he reach out to? He reached out to the overseers. Well, why? Because just like all these other overseers, they're in the same network. Let's see who these overseers are. It says these overseers are Greg Surratt, the president of the scandal plagued Association of Related Churches, or ARC, and Larry Stockstill, the founder of Bethany Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, it says that those are the two overseers. It doesn't list any other overseers for New Life. I don't know if there are or not, but we just talked about all of these other connections. And then you have Chris Hodges standing with Robert Morris, because Robert Morris was one of his apostolic elders before all this happened. Well, Greg Surratt is one of the guys who started and founded ARC with Chris Hodges. ARC is now ran out of Church of the Highlands. Chris Hodges and Greg Surratt are buddy, and guys, it gets worse. Larry Stockstill, and again, I've talked about Larry before. I've met Larry. All of my experiences with Larry have been phenomenal. But there is some smoke around Larry. Larry just, there's kind of a nepotistic succession, it looks like, with his son at Bethany. But I know this because they're proud of it. Larry is actually, he was the pastor of Chris Hodges. He knows all these guys. He was one of their mentors that sent them all out. So when Witcher says, I contacted the elders at New Life, yes, but what you really should have said was, I contacted a couple of my buddies in my same circle who know Brady and know Jimmy and know all of these guys and knew and supported Robert Morris. They were big fans of his teaching, the blessed life, and all of that. Yeah, I called some people who run in my same circles and they said there's nothing to see here. What else would they say? Of course, they're going to say there's nothing to see here because they don't want anybody looking at what's going on with them. And again, guys, this is just, I'm piecing this together from my perspective. This is all just my opinion. But if you go back and you look at part 1 and part 2 of the ARC investigation, you actually see, I believe it's in part 2, where John Gray, who used to be a member of the lead team of ARC just a few years ago, he said, hey, something along the lines of, I was caught in sin, and then none of my brothers in Christ came to help me. And he says, it's crazy when you look around and none of them are coming to help you because they've got worse things going on than you do, and they don't want their stuff coming out. Okay. And again, I actually give the quote on that video. You can go and you can look it up, but it's something like that. So again, we ask, is he saying the quiet part out loud, that a lot of these pastors are covering for each other because they want to protect their own interest and they don't want people looking at the stuff that they're doing? Well, it looks like that's exactly what's going on here, because Jimmy Witcher didn't ask the elders for those emails. He asked his buddies, who were also overseers and are a part of this one big circle. It also says Stockstill was an overseer at New Life in 2007, and documents suggest he too was informed about Morris's essay of Clemishire at that time. If that's true, then Larry would be disqualified as well. Again, I can't say that that's true. That's just what's been reported. But Jimmy Witcher told his congregation, I reached out to them in this process as well, just basically saying, hey, it just a matter of due diligence. Is there something here I'm not seeing? Are we missing something? And both of them, again, I reached out to New Life's overseers, 2 people, Two people he's friends with. He knows that, knew Robert Morris, that were a part of all this. Two people. Yeah. He reached out to two people. That was reaching out to the overseers. Can you imagine a mega church like this? And they're the only people who could hold the pastor accountable in any sort of way by the bylaws was likely two people. Two people who he's friends with and likely handpicked. Okay, so I wouldn't have expected them to say anything else. Now, of course, the Rose Report reached out to Trinity. They reached out to Jimmy Witcher, but they didn't hear anything back. But it says, in addition to providing oversight, Trinity Fellowship is receiving donations for Boyd's ministry. So all gifts are tax deductible, and this is important. A search of both Colorado and Texas businesses did not find a listing for Psalm 68 Ministries. It's also not listed with the IRS as a tax exempt organization. Why is that? Well, it's likely that way because, again, this is going to be created from the beginning as an association and convention of Trinity Church so that you don't have to have any sort of transparency. But I want to look at this before we finish out as well. Let's just go to Trinity's website and let's look at let's look at their team here, their team. And you also if you click our leadership, it takes you to this place. So this is them telling you this is how our church is led. It has the senior pastor right there as the senior pastor of Trinity Fellowship. Jimmy Witcher is the chairman of the board of elders and leads the executive team of Trinity Fellowship Association of Churches. The executive leader team may be the trustees, but here's what happens. Just think about this. Again, think about this governance structure that so many ARC churches and related churches to them teach. He's the chairman of the board, and the chairman of the board in their teaching is also who they call the CEO and president of the corporation, not the church, the corporation, because they say the church is split in two halves, the spiritual side and the corporate side. Now, I haven't seen the corporate side in the Bible, but they say it's split into the corporate side and your pastor needs to be your CEO. So likely, from everything we can see, it looks like he is operating as the CEO. Also, he leads as the chairman of the board, he leads the elders, and he leads the executive leadership team. The executive leadership team, if you come down here and you look at it right here, it's his wife, okay? And it's other people whose paychecks he signs. It's a small 4-person leadership team. He signs all their paychecks. He's married to one of them, so I'm sure they hold him very accountable. But it says Jimmy and his wife Kim became members of Trinity Fellowship in 1994 and have served in many different areas of ministry. They're passionate about helping people. Before entering full-time ministry at Trinity Fellowship, they spent over 25 years in business, where Jimmy gained extensive leadership experience while managing product development, international sales, and corporate marketing. So it sounds like he went from being a business leader in business to getting a promotion to the CEO of the corporation called Trinity Fellowship Church. That's what it sounds like. Okay. But it gives more information about them. That's it. Again, this is when you click on leadership, this is what you get: the senior pastor who leads the elders, the senior pastor who leads the executive leadership team. The executive leadership team includes two people who he's their boss, one person he's married with, and then everything else is just the campus pastors. You know what you won't see anywhere here? You won't see overseers. But again, who were his overseers? Let's see if we can find this so I can show you. And well, I missed it. Who were his overseers? I won't show you, but if you remember from early on, his overseers was Brady Boyd and Jimmy Evans. Okay, they don't even list those people, and those two people are probably the only people who could actually remove him. Do you see when we talked about today earlier on the live stream, we've asked the question in other videos, why do these church scandals keep happening? Why do we keep seeing so much of this sin repeat itself, this scandal repeat itself? Why is spiritual abuse so common? Well, you find a situation where a pastor is disqualified, forced to resign, he's removed. Within a month, he's back in ministry, totally untransparent, building it as under the umbrella of or association and convention of another church where he's the overseer as a conflict of interest. And then that guy says, well, it's okay because I reached out to these other overseers who are our friends. And it's just this one big circle of, well, you know what? We're going to say we think he's innocent and we're going to put him right back in ministry. And by the way, none of you can find any disclosures, including business disclosures, because we're going to hide it all under the umbrella of the church. And when you start asking questions, how in the world could they do this? It makes a whole lot more sense when you understand that ARC proposed form of governance, that hybrid form of governance, because then you realize, well, if all of these pastors are CEOs and presidents who can only be held accountable by the overseers they choose, and they all run in the same circles, then the only way they can really be removed is if they're forced under pressure from, I don't know, something like their elder board that says, we've got these emails if you don't resign. So he resigned, but here's the problem. And I don't know what else is going on. Like maybe there are good reasons. I don't know why they don't release those emails. I would encourage New Life's elders release those emails publicly. Like all of the evidence you've got, release it because unless this guy is completely forced out of ministry, and the only way he's going to be forced out of ministry, I'm just telling you, the only way it looks like he's going to be forced out of ministry is if Jimmy Witcher, those things come out and he thinks his church is going to stop giving and stop supporting him. If it's going to hurt his livelihood, then and probably only then would he turn against Brady Boyd because we don't know if Brady Boyd or any of these other guys have any, have anything that they know about him that he wouldn't want to get out. And again, I'm not saying that there is, but that's what it sounded like John Gray was talking about, right? So again, unless there's enough pressure to say it's going to hurt me more to cover for you, it's going to hurt me more to have you under my umbrella of ministry. Until that happens, then what we've got is we got a situation where even when someone's disqualified because they overlooked the essay of a child, they're right back in ministry because these governance structures don't have any real accountability. And we just got kings making kings and covering for each other. That's what it looks like to me. So when you ask, why is this happening? It's because we got way more churches than we realize, guys, that have no accountability. And look, I don't think this is the majority of churches. Someone's always going to ask, Jeffrey, just bagging on the church. Do you really think this is all churches? No, I don't even think this is the majority of churches. But here's what I will say I see more churches than not that are being planted and are brand new and are growing really fast and being called successful. The new model, I see the majority of those new churches that are being successful doing it this way, which means if we don't stand up and say, as the body of Christ, we require a greater level of accountability and we will not support churches with these sham governance structures. If we don't do something about it, then in 2 or 3 decades, the majority of churches in the United States, or even if it's not the majority of churches, it would at least be probably the majority of Christians. Because the majority of Christians in America, if I'm not mistaken, last time I looked at the numbers, attend the top 9% largest churches. Okay, so whether it's the majority of churches, the majority of Christians, if we keep going down this road, eventually this will be normal. And guys, if this is normal, then the church in America might as well just fold up and shut down because we ain't going to be looking anything like the church Jesus called us to be. And he's going to remove his hand. We got to be better. We cannot call ourselves the church and do this. So again, I said this earlier in the live stream. I said this on another video. We all have a role to play in holding the church accountable. Because it's not we go to church, so we hold the church accountable. We are the church. And if we allow people and churches and organizations to act like big corporations and kings and just jump back into ministry no matter what, then we become complicit in the sin. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, when nothing else will smoke somebody like this out, if the donations dry up, Brady Boyd doesn't keep this ministry going. If the donations dry up and nobody's attending that church and giving to that church, Jimmy Witcher doesn't take care of his boy, Brady Boyd. If the donations dry up, these overseers aren't going to answer his questions and don't want to be talked about in the public, right? So at the end of the day, with the money we give, the time we give, and our attendance, we have a voice. We have a voice. And then again, guys, it's not just parishioners, not just these church leaders. Anything new life that you could actually put out in the public. I know you may be scared. I know you may be scared Doodle sue you. Everybody in the world is scared of getting sued today, and that is real. Like, look, I got to talk to a lawyer later today because we're trying to do our best to be above reproach. But sometimes we got to be brave enough to say this is a kingdom issue. And if I'm going to have other church leaders try to silence me just because they're going to try to sue me and get the government involved, this is a kingdom religious issue. My God said the church would be something different, and I cannot stand for this. Right. So, look, be careful, new life. But if there's anything that you could share, I would encourage those elders to share it because if the information you say you have is true, then it feels dangerous that Brady Boyd would still be in ministry, and it feels dangerous that these people are covering for one another. And guys, it's one scandal after another. This form of governance, this group of people, there's all of these connections between the scandals. There are, and this is how we started in the live stream today. There are patterns to these issues. And until we address the roots of the patterns, they're going to keep happening. And I don't know about you, but I'm really, really tired of seeing this stuff happen in the church. We're better than that. Jesus has called us to be better than that. So I hope that you would join me because, guys, I hope I don't have to spend the rest of my life doing this, but I'm willing to if I need to. I'm hoping there's not a need because Reformation comes before then. But if I have to spend the rest of my life doing this, I will do everything that I can to make sure that those of you leaders who are hurting people, who are trying to act like kings, who are trying to avoid accountability, who are in this, man, Christian mafia looking network covering for each other. If I had to spend the rest of my life trying to do everything I can to shine the light on you, I'm going to do it because what happens when we turn the light on bright enough, the cockroaches scurry. And some of y'all need to scurry because we need all of us. We need all of us. And you can do more when you all start doing this together than I could ever do with a voice like this. Let's take a stand as the body of Christ. And guys, when something's happening in our body that shouldn't be, let's call it the cancer it is and say, we're not going to stand for this anymore. When we do that, when enough of us do that, that's when reform comes.